Welcome to the Nailed It Wall.
Welcome to episode 6 of the Nailed It Wall. On this week, we're going to take an in-depth look at Most Likely to Succeed. If you haven't seen this movie by now, we encourage you to go out and watch it. It's on Amazon Prime for free. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to the Nailed It Wall. I'm Mr. Lane, the STEM guy.
And I'm Mrs. Schofield.
Well, it feels good to be back. Last week, we took a hiatus from our podcast.
We did.
And both of us that we didn't get a podcast up last week. But you were in California the last 2 weeks. I've been on the East Coast, going between Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts.
Rough life.
Rough life. But like with every episode, we always like to start off how you've nailed it in a good way or a bad way. And you have a pretty epic story to share.
I do. So when I was in California, we were at my sister's, and we didn't get a ton of pool time at the beginning of the summer when we visited. It's June gloom out there. It's pretty typical for California. But when we went back, it was blazing hot. It felt very similar to home, actually, sadly so. But we hit the pool finally, and I brought my phone out there for some tunes. I'm really big into music. And so I put my phone on my flip-flops, and I kind of stuck it on the side of the pool next to this raft that was sort of in the pool. But they were safe. So just a minute or two later, my daughter started laughing about my flip-flops being in the pool, which that was not super funny anyway. That would be one fail because they are not meant for the water. They're those squishy yoga material. So I was a little bit distraught.
Aren't those your last pair of flip-flops?
My only last pair of flip-flops, thanks to my wonderful dog Blue chewing the other pair. But then I realized, oh my gosh, my phone was sitting on top of my flip-flops. You know, what happened to the phone? And so I saw at the bottom of the shallow end, thank God it was a shallow, but it doesn't even matter. I would have got on scuba gear. It does not matter because my phone was at the bottom of the pool, and I was trying to keep my hair dry like a lot of girls do when they get out of the pool, but that was not to be. So I dive down, get my phone. I'm like practically going to give it mouth to mouth, but it's totally fine. So what I learned from this is I guess that the newer phones, the X, I don't even know what they are. I think I have an XR or XS, that they are water resistant. So that is a fun fact for anybody that has a newer phone. Don't panic. You don't have to go out and buy rice if you don't have it. It all worked out. It's fine. It's trucking along. I'm very, very grateful. So it could have been a very bad moment. It still was a failed it, but I was very lucky.
Yeah, and you've only had this phone a month, right?
It's very, very new. I got it specifically so I could take pictures of my new little baby niece that I knew was coming, and then pictures from promotion at the end of the year. It's a very, very new phone, and I was distraught because I wanted it for so long. How long did I put that off? I mean, since you got yours, I had major phone envy, and it was a sad, sad moment. I genuinely just felt like just sick in the pit of my stomach. And for anybody that's ever dropped their phone in water, which I have done in the past, other phones, and that's usually pretty much game over. So it was a nice thing. So well done, Apple, as a perk.
Yes. Technology, you gotta love that. Mm-hmm. Score for you. Well, that's a great story there. I couldn't imagine your face. I can only imagine Ella kind of the look of shock, and you just sweating bullets.
It was not a good scene. And Ella, I will tell you, there was no panic for her. She just kind of thought, easy come, easy go. She looked very, very chill about the whole thing.
Great story. Flip-flop floated in the pool, and then phone at the bottom.
And the flip-flops made it, so
yes.
Thank God.
I'm wearing them today.
Mm-hmm.
My Nailed It story, it goes back to, I flew back for 10 days by myself with my 2 kiddos. We went to Maine for a week, and my wife is coming later in the break there. And my kids, we just had an amazing time. Like, we just had the time of our lives. It's always a little nerve-wracking. You go anywhere with your kids, but let alone doing, like, Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. And we always say our kids are living their best lives.
They really are.
We were doing the touristy things. We were doing the beach. We were hanging out with my dad, hanging out with grandparents, doing the family reunion, taking trains to the top of Mount Washington. It was just an epic trip, and I've never felt so refreshed kind of coming back into school year, stepping away.
Totally.
And, now it's like schools are right around the corner. I'm just like ready to get back into it because of this time I had with family and friends and the beach totally.
Well, and I think that that's actually a really cool thing about summer for us as teachers is we really need to recharge. And it's just such a gift to be able to have a trip like what you had. I mean, honestly, I feel like I should have a trip like that. I do feel a little bit robbed, but to be able to go and just have that intensive time with your family and just doing things that you love, where there's just nothing. It's just whatever you put on. You guys had a great summer bucket list. We had a really awesome summer bucket list. And then to really just prioritize those special moments that you want to be able to give to yourself, to your kids, is just the best.
It truly is, and we are so lucky to do the job that we do. We love it so much, but it's like you want to give those opportunities to your kids that you never had. I mean, I couldn't believe Mackenzie, our niece and nephew, Kai and Dylan, they do surfing lessons on Monday in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and my kids are like, we're going to do it. And I didn't realize you're supposed to be 8, and Ryan's only 6, and he was out there, he was surfing, like hitting these things. My daughter was like blue crush. I couldn't believe it. And just like, it just makes you so proud that your kids have these opportunities and to take these experiences that you had as a kid. But I mean, my kids are surfing. It was amazing.
I'm just saying, you are at least 8 years old, so I do feel that you should have been on board out there as well, but that's fine. Next trip.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a great summer.
All right, segue into this week's episode. We're going to continue our talk about a movie that has inspired us so much as educators, as parents, our whole belief as to how we shape our classrooms, how we treat students, how we incorporate tech in the classroom. So much so that I felt like I had to watch the documentary a second time just to get pumped up for our part 2 of today's podcast.
Yeah, that movie, I think we had so much anticipation of what that movie would be like. So for us to be able to finally get the opportunity to watch it, to see how many things resonated with us, but then to really be able to mill it over, it was just so much for just one, sit down and talk it through, just because there's so much to consider. And even things that we've come back to after the first one, the more we think about it, and then just things that have come up that resonate with this whole thing, like our DBUSD rally, and a lot of the stuff that one of the speakers said, it really connected right to this, and it just kind of drives home, what's our goal for education? What are we trying to provide to these kids? What should all that look like?
Yeah, and you talked right before we left, before our breaks, before you went to California, you were telling me about the school in Silicon Valley that a lot of parents are really upset. Explain what's going on there.
So what happened was a bunch of kind of like tech CEO type people, they banded together and they opened this school, the alternative school. I think they're called alt schools. And they started with one, but then they opened a few. And it was kind of like a different approach to education, kind of similar, I would think, in style to High Tech High, right? So, and I think for the most part, they were successful in some ways. I don't know that they were monitoring their success in the same way that the documentary really showcased what High Tech High is. I think that they're doing a really good job trying to keep tabs and figure out what this looks like big picture long term. But regardless, so they have these schools and they were losing money and decided that they were going to start selling the curriculum that was actually successful at these alt schools. So they closed a lot of their campuses. I think they just had one left, and parents were furious because they basically feel that their kids were guinea pigs, and the parents are saying, okay, we believe in your vision. We believe that what you're saying has value. We're going to put our kids there. We're going to put their trust there. And then they feel betrayed because they took a chance with their kids' education, and now there's no place for these kids to go. So it's like this scramble situation. And where do you even put your kids after they've been exposed to that? How do you work backwards? There's just not a lot of opportunities for kids to have that.
Yeah, and I think that's like the hardest thing as a parent. Like you want to, like you talked about, like talk a little bit about like the closing doors as a parent, like the last thing you want to do.
Well, and that was actually in the documentary. It was one of the mothers, and I can't remember which one. I think it was the lady that went to go talk to one of the teachers and was talking to your Berkeley guy, I think. And she was saying, as a parent, you're trying to figure out how to do what's best for your kids. And we know there's this discrepancy with the skill set and then jobs that are available and jobs that will be available. So there's that breakdown in the what you need to prepare kids with. But what does that look like? So you think, okay, well, I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to try this high tech high. But you're concerned, like, that's a gamble. You don't know if you're going to close a door for your kid. You don't know if that's going to ultimately help because the research has not shown for sure if that's going to be better. So you're concerned. You're choosing to take a step of faith and do that for your kid, but you don't really know if it's going to pan out in that way.
Which is like the most scary thing. I remember 6 years ago, this is our 6th year being back in Arizona, and we were getting ready to move back. My stepmom, my dad, and my brother-in-law, they're like, why would you move from the #1 state in education to the number 48th? And I just said time and time again, like, my kids would not get what they would get from Sierra Verde at any other school. And I just said that over and over. And I have a 3rd grader and a 1st grader, and I have taught here for the last 5 years, and I could not agree more with that statement. How impactful this school has been, and like has opened so many doors, and both of them have grown in their own special ways.
Yeah.
Even this morning we were talking about how different my kids are, and if they were at a school in Massachusetts, they just would not have what these amazing teachers do for all the kids here. And you put tons of research in, like you've moved all over the country, and this is something that you spend hours poring over every little detail, and you pick this school for a certain reason. And you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, STEM was, it's kind of a new buzzword. I mean, it's not that it wasn't being done. It just wasn't, it's not prevalent. I think it's becoming more, especially in Arizona, which is super cool. But it was not, we came from Naperville, which is a really, really awesome school district. It's very high rated, a very desirable spot for education. However, what my kids do here, what our kids do here, it's such a high level of really the problems. It's those critical thinking and all of the soft skills that they get, plus the exposure to the engineering, all of those things, all of the engineering design process and creating and just thinking differently. It's just a different place here. And my son even was talking to me about kids. We're at a K-8. So there's kids that think, well, I don't really want to go to 7th, 8th here. I want to go to a middle school. And he said to me, why would you leave this? Why would you ever want to leave this school? And he said, I've seen so many people leave thinking it's going to be better. And then they come back because they realize it's just something so special here. And I said, no, I know it's true. But there's just a totally different mindset here about what we value and what we try to expose kids to and bring out from them, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's, we've been very fortunate as parents. Our kids have been very fortunate to be beneficiaries of that. But it's a daunting task as a parent, like to ensure that you're not going to close like a certain door for your students' upbringing in that sense. And the documentary does such a great job of like kind of going through that first day of school. As they're growing, kind of like bringing out that student voice is the most impactful thing. And then exhibition night is just an amazing piece of work that High Tech High has just been doing for years and years. And I mean, I think you talked a little bit like that wheel that they created that
the gear
represented all of these ancient civilizations, and had this like, I mean, the teacher really had like that mic drop moment when he was explaining all the little nuances.
Yeah, well, exhibition night. So what they were saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what they were saying is instead of giving the kids all of these standardized tests and all of the things that you would typically measure understanding and comprehension about what you've been doing all year, their exhibition night is essentially that. But it's they have to show what they've done, and so it looks differently depending on the classes, the different grades. But then this one group of kids, they had 2 teachers collaborating together, and they had to investigate, kind of learn about ancient civilizations, how they rose and how they fell. And then they had to make that basically one huge cog, part of this huge gear thing. And it was so impressive. They had to represent that visually with some kind of a thing that would fit into this gear thing.
Yeah, they're using like the laser cutter.
So
like,
crazy.
It's insane like how all these parts go together. I think my favorite part of the whole movie was it must have been like some high school kid. He's like, I've been coming here for like 7 years, and he's like, that's up there,
Yeah.
And but it's even more fit in that there was like that one piece missing from Brian's group.
I loved that because, when you put together a movie, a documentary or something, you're choosing what you're going to highlight. And really, I think that the whole documentary is trying to kind of, grapple with, like, hey, I think we need to change education. I think really it's difficult to watch that and not agree with that. Even though I don't really think that they come right out and say it, because they do show a variety of hiccups with that, speed bumps and all kinds of stuff like, hey, maybe have you thought of this? But that specifically, they didn't have to add. They didn't have to show that whole part of it. They could have glossed over it, and they didn't. That group, he wanted it to be so the way he envisioned, and he didn't want to go small. He had this vision, and he was just like obsessed with it. And his group was, bless them. I just felt so bad for that group, but they put their trust in him, and they ultimately didn't have something to showcase that night, which was heartbreaking. But what I loved about that is that kid had such disappointment. He had this exit thing. What would you call this? Like I don't even know what that part.
Kind of like the sum all of like their presentation, like kind of like all those pieces that kind of go into the engineer and design process that they probably use.
Yeah, so they had to kind of reflect on how they felt that things went and all of that, and it was a really cool. I love that part of the movie, but. So he was bummed, and he learned some really hard truths, but he learned it because he experienced that. And the teacher had said, like, I could never have got him there just by telling him that. I love that.
I think the best part too is the teacher explaining that, where he's like, you need to be persevere. You got to problem solve. Do this, and this. And the teacher just sat back, and I mean, they were still working to the last 15 minutes on exhibition night to try to get that thing done, working behind the scenes. And I think the hardest part was even for the parent to sit back and have to watch her son fail. And like that interview was that was crushing to kind of see that, because she was aching for her kid, and this kid, he worked around the clock. And they showed him in his house, and you could just see the excitement and the passion that he had for this project, because he had a vision. And I love when the teachers were kind of going through that presentation. They're like, here's an easy project, here's a hard project, here's where you are, Brian, and your group. And it's like off the charts there, and they supported that. And
they did. They let him fail too. And that mom, it's funny that you say that, because remember, again, going back to the DVUSD rally thing, how they did the stat about, what did they say? 33% of parents would call for their
child's workplace.
A child's workplace if they were having problems there. And that's just, you said, I don't even know if it was 33, but whatever it was, you said, I think that might be low, just because of how things have gone now with that kind of, you want to fix things for your kids. And that mom, she just had to sit in the pocket. Like, she had to sit there and just let her kid have that fail. And, you don't see her fixing it. She's there. She's supportive. But then you also see her when he goes back. Like, after that project is over, he goes back and he's still working on it. During summer vacation, he's still working on it. The teacher is there. That parent is there. And all three of them are there right at the end when he's finished it and he puts it up, and what an amazing experience.
Yeah, it was truly awesome. And then is it Samantha? Samantha, her side, everything. It was cool to kind of see where she really grew. And I love the play that they did, and how they kind of took that and brought it into a modern day play, and how much that student grew in that 1 year. And the things that I love that part where everyone's talking about being a leader, this was in the school for them. And when the teacher says that's just one student, every student here has done things that they never thought they could do before, and they've grown in so many different ways. And I thought that was the most powerful part, because everyone kind of found their different kind of their niche or
Yeah.
niche.
Yeah. I never know how to say that word either.
Yeah, I always say niche, but that's just me. And I absolutely love that part of the documentary because
Yes, I did too.
he's like, you highlighted this one, but like every single one, and it kind of went back to these, and the parents are there, and that's what education should be. It should be inclusive to the parents. Like it should be incorporating the community members, like celebrating these things, but also understanding the failure aspect to it. And that's the hard thing that I run into, like kind of running like STEM makerspace class. It's like it's not a typical test. Like it's like, how do you want to push those kids, and I often have a hard time, like if a kid has a crazy idea, I was like, the last thing I want to do is like rein that kid in just for a grade. And I want you to play it safe. I want those kids to come up with the craziest ideas and feel like they're safe and they're not going to be penalized because they took a risk.
Yeah, I mean, and then, it, the hard thing is working in the parameters of an education field. People want to be able to measure. They want to be able to measure what that child has achieved, whether it's the content part, like certain standards. How do you measure? How can you keep people accountable and like even know what the kids walked away from with that, or with from that. But I think like that girl, Samantha. So the goal is to put on this play. So you see their understanding. Then yeah, they wanted her to have an experience with leadership. But what's so crazy, and we experience this with Moxie, is it's like this byproduct that comes off of it is you're putting them into these situations, but then they're completely viewing themselves differently after they've experienced that. And you can't teach that in the same way. It's through that sense of, I don't know, I did this and it was hard and it was, I hated it sometimes, but there's things that they grapple with. And so, not everything is easily tested. It's just things that kind of unfold within these kids. And what she walked away with, the way she sees herself, and she was so meek. Remember when she was sitting at that panel at first,
Yeah.
and like he could barely get her voice out. It was like how she said it, she gets nervous and it's like squeaky, high pitched. And then at the end, she's like, I need you to, remember when the girls were laughing and she's like, we have one more day. Like she
Yeah.
was like
And just her like pump up like before they're on
yes.
stage, like really like pushing those kids and like kind of giving that pep talk there. I don't know, it's hard. Like we had a big DVUSD like back to school kickoff. We had an author there kind of talking about like this new generation of kids, and all these different types of research. And listening to that, I was kind of blown away by the number of high performance students who start college and who don't finish college.
Yeah.
And then you think about the amount of debt this country has, and it's hard to think about, what are we preparing these kids for? Are we preparing them for life, like right after high school? Is that the end of public education? Are we preparing them all to go to college? So it's like something that I struggle with too. Every day when I say goodbye to my kids, I say, get some knowledge so you can go to college. And like at this point, like even myself, I'm like, would that be the best bet? Like in 10 years from now, is that like something that they need? And even when he was talking to some big CEOs, and he was saying, we no longer hire people with a master's. And you think like back in the day, it was like, get your college degree, get a master's. And some of these huge companies, like, you do not need a college degree to work for us. You need work experience, and you need to show these skills that kind of go back to those soft skills. And as I was listening to that, I was just like kind of blown away by what all these top companies have been doing for years, but yet we're still funneling all these students through the college system.
What was he calling it too? How he said it's so offensive to him when people call them soft skills. He likes to call them, what did he say? Professional skills or something. I can't remember the other term. But like I do like calling them soft skills because they're the ones that people don't realize that you're going to need to hit harder. And so they're kind of those ones that are overlooked, but they're helpful. And I do think, I mean, because that's what they are right now. That's where they fall in. And but you realize that for those, like for that guy, when he was talking about how a lot of those companies aren't looking for the masters and all of that, but it doesn't hurt them, right? Isn't that what he said? He goes, I mean, but if they have these other things, it won't hurt them. I think when you say that to your kids, you're planting to set a seed to have them understand that that is within their grasp. They're able to do that. And so if our kids, decide not to, it won't be because they don't realize that they can. It'll be because they choose to do something else, I think. And I think that, the intention still is good, that we're trying to say, like, this should be part of kind of your big picture. Like there's something there's coming for you down the pipe. But to know, what so many things like vocational skills, maker spaces, I feel that you're coming in at such an important time, because I think those are a big part of the future, creating, building, innovating, and all those things, not just coding, not just computer science, but all the stuff you do in a maker space. Like, that's a huge movement.
On the big part of the movie where they really talked about, like, all these jobs are going to be gone. It's
All the
like,
jobs are
what
gonna
do
be
you
gone.
do when you realize a robot can do this job? Like, all these things are going to be gone, so now you're going to be forced to think, to create, to make these things. And those are like all those kind of soft skills come in there. Now, kind of switching gears a little bit, do you know what a perfect SAT score is?
I do
today?
not. No.
Now, when we were in high school, it was 1,600. I do not know what a perfect SAT score is. I thought it was 1,800 a couple years ago. I don't understand the 200-point gap there, but I do not know it. Do you know what a good score in an ACT test would be?
I do not.
You do not. I do not either. So, and you have a sophomore in high school. I'm
Yes.
sure your daughter is
100
well aware.
I don't think she knows yet, but she will next year when that's on her radar, because in the following year is when they take that, and you can bet she'll know what it is.
Yeah, and then they must do the PSATs like as a sophomore to kind of like prep them.
I believe they do.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling. Like that 1,600 was always like that thing that would always strive. I always felt like I was going to wake up one morning like Zach Morris. Remember on Saved by the Bell, Zach Morris got that perfect 1,600. I was like, I'm just going to roll in. I'm going to get a 1,600. And nowadays, I don't think kids or educators, like if you went around, if we did a Google form and where people couldn't research it and look it up, like I don't think even teachers know like what is that the highest bar on those standardized tests. And the movie does a great job kind of going back and forth about the importance. And the thing I love is like we always like treat students as humans, and they all have a story, and we want to know that story and incorporate and embrace it. And what I loved about it is just it really talks about like the anti-test scores and how important each person is as a human.
Yeah, and I do think that test scores are just so tricky, right? Because yes, it could possibly change their whole lives, these kids' whole lives, because it opens doors and all of those things. But I feel like in an age where you have so many kids with depression and drug and alcohol issues and scary the suicide rates, the pressure for them to perform on the level that society is telling them that they should be, and to have basically everyone kind of like a one size fits all. And if you're not measuring up, or even if you're getting these high scores, like there's not a lot of joy in that. There's just so many kids that they're hitting their marks, but there's no joy. Like the kids in Colorado, how the girl said, well, I want to ace the class. I want to ace the test because that's going to open doors for me. Will that give them fulfillment? Will that make them happy? They've figured out how the system works. So maybe they're really good at it, but they're just miserable. Like they're so unhappy. And that's just so heartbreaking to me,
And I'm glad you brought that up, because like when the movie finished, like at the bottom of Amazon Video, they have a bunch of like trailers like of movies that they'd recommend that kind of go along with that. And I watched, like I love watching trailers. I could watch a documentary in the time that I usually spend watching the trailers.
You do love trailers, yeah.
And so by the time I'm like, oh, it's time for bed, I was like, I just spent an hour and a half watching trailers. And there's one on Finland. I just can't get over like
Oh man,
how Finland succeeds like that,
they're
and
crushing it.
yeah, it's insane. And these
Yeah.
kids are outside playing. They're not even tested till like they're in eighth grade, maybe even later. So that was like pretty powerful. But like I'm glad you talked about the pressure. And like there was another documentary just following these students, like 180 days of how much pressure they're under to perform to get into these top schools, or they're already going to these top high schools, and they've been going to these schools for X amount of dollars that these parents are invested in them at such a young age. And just that drain that it takes on them, it was just like just watching that. And then Matt Damon, his mom was a teacher. He was narrates another documentary, American Teacher, and it was just powerful to kind of see like what kind of problem we're going to have in terms of the teacher shortage, the profession, like people staying in this like profession, loving what they do because of the pressure that comes on teachers, comes on students. But it's kind of heartbreaking. And then the bill, like he had a great piece in that trailer. If you don't watch the movie, I didn't watch the movie. I did watch the trailer. I love the part where he's talking about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and how they've donated billions of dollars. And the one thing Bill Gates says, it's having a great teacher in that classroom. He's like, that's the number one factor. And that's what, there's a bunch of people saying that that's the most important thing. And getting those great teachers in the classroom, but I don't know how you alleviate that pressure. I mean, I saw it like with a second grade student of the homework and performing, and it's hard. It's tough on these kids, and it takes a toll on you as a parent, as an educator, and you do your best, but it's these kids, and you think about those kids at you know the best schools. You think about kids that are not at very good schools and aren't afforded these same opportunities. Even like the lottery, like student, like I mean, it's just this is like their Willy Wonka moment, like
Yeah.
getting that lottery ticket because it's going to lead to a better life. And
Doors will open for them. Yeah, there's so much that you just touched on, but that's the hard thing. And what's the balance? Ultimately, I know that we both agree. Our ultimate goal is we want our kids to be incredibly happy. We want them to be able to live the life that they want to live. And we don't want there to be doors closed for them, but we don't want the weight of the world on their backs to be able to do things that, that maybe they feel they're supposed to do. My daughter very much wants to be a doctor now, and I think that's awesome. When we were in California, she talked a lot about, well, I want to go to UCLA. I'm thinking, that's expensive. I'm sure, like maybe a community college. But, if ultimately she wants to go there, lots of grants, scholarships. I mean, Lord help me. But that's fine. I mean, kids, they're going to have their dreams. And if that's her dream and she has a good reason and she wants to go for that, then she should go for that. But I don't want her to go for things because she's heard that that's what she's supposed to do. I don't want her to go for things because there's pressure to be something. And if you're not that thing, then you've failed. And that's what I don't want. I don't want that for our kids. I don't want that for the kids that we teach. I want them to find what they connect with, what just makes them filled with joy and like fired up, and then they should go out and do that. And whatever that's going to look like, for us, like what can we expose these kids to at our school that's going to unleash what they already have inside, and it's different for every kid.
yeah, and kind of switching gears a little bit, it's funny that me and you were talking about having debt and student loans, and we both have our masters, and we wouldn't be able to do the job that we're doing today if we didn't go back and get our masters. And we absolutely love what we're doing.
We do.
But you think of like all these Fortune 500 companies, like there's no like precedent that you need to have your masters in order to do this job. And we needed that masters to have this job and to do what we love and to inspire the next generation. And how important, I don't know if that's going to shift like as time goes on, but I even think about my wife. She works in healthcare. That one thing that she needed to have a master's degree. It doesn't matter if it was even in that. In order to apply for the job and the position she's in now, she needed to have that master's degree. And you think about those things, I think those doors are going to get less and less as time goes on. But for us being educators, we needed to have that master's degree in order to be able to do what we love to do.
Well, and then again, going back to that speaker that talked at our rally thing, he was talking about how he had the one son that had a cumulative grade point average of 1.5 and was just really flailing in the system. But then he connected. He connected to, what was it, computer software engineer? Like that was something that someone planted. And then from there, he had to know, I guess he talked to that teacher or whatever, what are the steps to get there? And one of the steps for him to get there was a master's, right? So you have this kid that would never have been on his radar, but those are going to be the stepping stones for him to reach his dreams. So that is a good fit for him. Then you have how he was doing his tree analogy, and he was talking about you can be an electrician or you could be as an
Mechanical
engineer. Yeah. And so like the difference, and that was a higher, like you needed more education to be the engineer part of it, but you would have debt. You're going to make, I think you said you would make less money.
Yeah.
But it's just so interesting,
But an electrician would make more money, than the mechanical engineer.
Right. But if that's what you want to be, then you go for it. But, to be able to honor and to help kids kind of figure out what their thing is, like what are their dreams, what are their passions, and then, help them figure that. I don't think education, I don't think the higher education, masters and stuff are a thing of the past, but I think they're a thing of the past as a blanket ticket to your future. I think that's the thing, is that they're not necessarily, that's not your guarantee. But if that's what you need to get what you want to do, then great. But there's a lot of people, I think, that are holding masters that there's nothing for them to do.
No, totally. And it's, this is going to be a problem that kids need to have those skills more and more as they go into the workforce, because it's not going to be, you're not going to work in a warehouse anymore. It's all going to be robotics. I mean, even some of these, lower end, we'd call them like white collar, blue collar, thinking skills are going to be done by, computers. I mean, even like the fact of, computers can write articles now, and it's so scary. It's like, computers essentially can do all these things that a human can do, and they're growing at, what do they say, 200% per year, like more powerful,
Crazy.
smarter, faster. It kind of is mind-boggling. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on?
Oh my gosh. I mean, you and I could talk for so long about this, but, I think for just teachers, for educators, overall, and for parents, I think it's just important to really try and kind of do a mental shift if you're not there already, to just kind of think like, maybe we need to kind of revisit what education is doing, and be open to the fact that it might be time for a change. Maybe we need to do things a little differently, and just kind of put kids as the center. If they're the center and they're the focus, hopefully that's going to be a way to drive where we need to go with education.
I couldn't agree more. If you have not seen Most Likely to Succeed, again, it's free on Amazon Prime. It is probably one of the most powerful documentaries that I've seen in terms of education and where we're going in terms of a workforce and schools. And, me and you, we always laugh all the time. We would not last at a traditional school one day. And we love the freedom that we have to build, to create,
To inspire.
Yeah. And so I encourage you, watch that documentary. Let us know what you think. We already love, we're getting some comments on Twitter that people have been inspired to watch the documentary based off our Part 1 podcast. So we love that. Keep the love coming our way, and we will see you guys next week. If you're like us and you can't get enough of the Nailed It Wall, you can find us on Twitter. Search for me at Mr. Lane, the STEM guy.
And me at a positive proton.